Coming up on Green Bay Nation, the Packers fall short in Denver and drop a third straight game. Can Green Bay get back on track against a division rival? All that and more next on Green Bay Nation. Hello, welcome to Green Bay Nation. I'm Lauren Helmbrecht, and joining me to chat everything Packers, he's a Packers beat writer for the Green Bay Press-Gazette, Ryan Wood, and he's a radio host for 107.5 and 1400 The Fan, Marcus Eversole. Welcome back to the show. Are your spirits higher than the Packers are?
Yeah, I would think.
Don't think it's possibly lower than them. They're not quite as high as Pikes Peak, though. Man, those mountains out in Denver, those were nice. Football, not so much.
Yeah, the highlight of your trip was
definitely not the
game.
football.
All right, well, let's talk about the game. Green Bay had the opportunity to get right against the Broncos. That's what we talked about last week. The Broncos, the worst scoring defense in the league. They only had one win, and yet Green Bay failed to score a point before halftime and fell 19-17. So, Marcus, Ryan, is this the worst loss of the Packers season so far?
Yeah, I'll say yes. That was the worst loss of the season because I think that was the worst opponent the Packers have played this season. I know it's on the road, and there's nothing easy ever about playing on the road in the National Football League, but the Broncos are one of the worst teams in the NFL. They had the worst defense in the NFL statistically, and the Packers are coming off the bye week, and yet they get shut out in the first half and lose that game. And frankly, the Broncos were playing from ahead the entire game. I mean, the Broncos looked like the better team, and yet coming away from it, I don't think any higher of the Broncos. I just think it was more of a reality check of where this Packers team is at. They're not a good football team.
You know who else doesn't think any higher of the Broncos as Broncos fans? I was going to the press box elevator down to the locker room after the game, and it's a weird setup. We walked by some Broncos fans, and there's a Broncos fan dad who's talking to his son, and the joy in his voice, yeah, we actually won a game. No, we're still not any good. We won a game. That's where the Packers are. It didn't sway the Broncos fan base's opinion at all. They're one of the worst teams in the league, and they lost to a team that's slightly better than them, but terrible. So, yeah, it was two bad football teams. This was the worst loss that they've had so far.
So the Packers recognized very early in the season that they've struggled to score points before halftime. They're starting slowly. It's one thing to know that that's a problem, and it's a totally different thing to address the problem that they've figured out. Who's to blame for these consistent slow starts?
I mean, when it's this bad, this consistently, there's plenty of blame to go around. So I'll just highlight one direction that you can point the finger, and that is the coaching staff. You script the first part of the game plan. You spend all week game planning for a specific opponent, what plays you think will work, and then you go out and run them. Well, the Packers, 6 games into the season, just think about this. 6 games into the season, they are averaging 4.3 points per game in the first half. They're averaging 4 points per game in the first half in real life. How in the world? You got to score a touchdown almost by accident, but yet the Packers are not doing that right now. Their last touchdown in the first half was back in week 2. They've only scored a touchdown on one opening possession all season. That was back in week 1. Whatever, that just goes to show you the Packers don't know who they are right now.
Jordan Love averaged 3.6 yards per pass in the first half, so there are actually lower numbers than 4.5, but not many. That's pretty putrid. Look, don't throw things at me. It's not an excuse. It's the reality. Youth is to blame, and that's just the reality. They have a first-year starting quarterback. Every single pass catcher in their offense, every single one, is developing. They have a 7th-round pick last year at left tackle. They've had one healthy game of Aaron Jones. Their defense, that's not youth. That defense can do better, and it's done pretty well, but when you're dealing with this much youth, this is what you get. It's going to take time. It's not going to take 6 games, and what you get is bad. I mean, this is bad. I'm not saying anything different, but it's because of the youth.
All right, so losing to the Broncos, bad. Losing a third straight game, bad. Failing to address well-established problems, very bad. What is the most concerning thing that you learned from the Packers in this loss?
Right now, even though the wins and losses to me this season are not as important as the big picture where you're seeing improvement, and I think that's most concerning right now is 6 weeks into the season, 6 games in, we haven't seen many, if any, signs of improvement. Now, 6 weeks, a month and a half, that's probably not a fair enough sample size to expect them to all of a sudden just be a good football team when they're as young as they are. But yet, I don't get the sense that they're any closer to figuring out who they are or even who they want to be now compared to where they were a month and a half ago. And I think that's concerning. I mean, we talked about it coming into the season a lot. Most of us, because they're so young, most of us expected to see some quote-unquote growing pains coming in, and we can expect to see more. But in order for them to be growing pains, you have to see growth. You have to see improvement. Without any growth, it's just pain. And right now, that's where the Packers are at.
Yeah, and the disappointment is that a month ago, this was a team that was riding on cloud nine. They thought this was, after that Saints comeback win, this was Favre to Keetrick Taylor in '92 all over again, and it just went the opposite direction in a blink. I think, look, this is day 38. Tomorrow's day 39 since they scored a first-half touchdown. It's been over 133 first-half minutes since Jaden Reed took a jet sweep pass in the early second quarter in Atlanta, week 2, and scored a first-half touchdown. They have 6 first-half points since then. It's stunning. It's impossible to win in this game when you do nothing in the first half, and that's what they've done. I think that's got to change. That's most concerning.
All right, when we come back, Packers are playing a game in Lambeau for the first time in over a month. And it's not just any game, it's against a division rival. Up next on Green Bay Nation, are the Packers ready for a surging NFC North foe? We'll see. Welcome back to Green Bay Nation. I'm Lauren Helmbrecht alongside Ryan Wood and Marcus Eversole. Green Bay, nearly halfway point of the season, and they have not seemed to figure out a flow. The Packers are on a 3-game losing streak and have scored fewer than 20 points in 4 straight games. And Matt LaFleur keeps talking about there's X amount of games left in the season. There's 12, there's 10, there's 11. Soon there's going to be 1 game left in the season. Ryan, is it time to hit the panic button yet?
Well, it is if you're under this ill-conceived notion that they were going to compete in 2023, but that was never the reality. And I understand this is a fan base that for 3 decades now, week to week, game to game, you're just living and hanging on every single snap. But this is a rebuild. And the reality is the only thing that could bring panic is if you got hardened evidence, proof that Jordan Love's not the guy. And that, I'm going to give you a harsh truth here, that's not coming this year. It's not coming this year because they don't have the pieces around to really decipher that. Think about how different this would be if this offense still had Davante Adams and Jordan Love was producing like this. That would be hardened proof. You can't do it with Davante Adams. Well, you can't do it with anyone. They don't have a Davante Adams. Everyone he's throwing to is developing. There isn't a team in the league with fewer catches or yards as a leading receiver than Romeo Doubs with 23 catches and 258 yards. That's the reality of what the situation that he has. You're probably don't panic until 2024. You have to let this ride out.
Do you think Packers fans can wait that long?
I don't think they'll listen to a word I just said, but I'm just telling you the truth. I'm here to bring you the honesty.
All right, that's why we have you on the show. Thank you very much.
Do what I can.
Ryan. Well, talking about the Minnesota Vikings, they're coming to town on Sunday, and they're coming off a great win on Monday Night Football, beating the San Francisco 49ers. And again, this is without Justin Jefferson. He's on the IR. He's on the sidelines. What are the strengths of this Vikings team, Marcus, with one of the best wide receivers not even playing?
They still have a quarterback, and I know people like to make fun of Kirk Cousins, and I'm not going to sit here and argue that Kirk Cousins is a great quarterback, but Kirk Cousins can be really good. He just doesn't do it consistently, and right now he's playing like one of the best quarterbacks in the league. He's the 4th highest rated passer right now coming into this game. He's leading the league in touchdowns coming into this game. Obviously, being without the best receiver in the league in Justin Jefferson, that's a big loss, but you just saw what he did against the Niners defense on Monday night that nobody shreds. Kirk Cousins just shredded that Niners defense, 35 of 45, 378 yards. He threw a couple touchdowns. He made rookie receiver Jordan Addison look like Justin Jefferson. Again, I'm not saying Kirk Cousins is a great quarterback, but he can be really good if you let him.
Jordan Addison, fellow USC alum.
Here we go.
Just saying.
Here we go.
All right. So
where'd you go to school, Lauren?
A good school. All right. Yeah. Let's get back to the Packers. Obviously, injuries. Big factor for the team so far. We'll talk a little bit about that later in the show. 2 new players added to the IR on the defense, and the defense is supposed to be bolstering this Packers team. What does Joe Barry's unit have to do against the Vikings to make this a game?
I'll be short and sweet. They have to do what the 49ers could not do on Monday night, and that is rush the passer. The Minnesota Vikings held the Niners without one single sack. Nobody does that against the 49ers, much less the Vikings. It feels like the Vikings' O-line is always a weakness. Not so much right now. One of the best parts about this Packers defense is getting after the passer. They better pressure Kirk Cousins.
They need to do what Matt LaFleur said Monday, and he was absolutely right. For 2 straight games now, the Packers defense has held an opponent, a bad opponent, below 20 points. And if this was 2016 Aaron Rodgers, that's good enough to win. But it's not. That's not the reality of the situation. They were going against the Broncos offense that was tied for 4th in the league entering with 11 giveaways, and they didn't generate a single turnover. There's a level for them to get to. It's not just about limiting points. It's about making game-changing plays, and that means taking the ball away. They've got to get some turnovers.
No turnovers against the Broncos. That would be a major bolster for the Packers offense if they were able to get back on the field. But speaking about the Packers defense, they've added 2 key players to the injured reserve, and Green Bay has to start prepping for Week 8 while still recovering from Week 7. When we come back, it's time to head into the locker room to hear how the players are taking the new responsibilities as their teammates take on rehab. That story and more next. Welcome back to Green Bay Nation. Packers 2021 first rounder Eric Stokes was practically giddy in the locker room days before the Broncos game. After over 11 months of rehabbing and working his way back, the cornerback was ready to play once again, but after just 4 snaps on special teams, Stokes re-injured his hamstring and is heading back to the injured reserve. And unfortunately for the Packers, he's not the only player who got hurt this week. It's time to get in the zone. Cam is there.
Probably the worst time for this to occur for Green Bay during a 3-game slide, but they've been bit with the injury bug. Darnell Savage on the IR, Eric Stokes added back to the IR for the 2nd time this season. Of course, injuries to Jair Alexander, Devondre Campbell, Christian Watson, the names go on, but even with that in effect, these players know they can't dwell on these ailments.
I mean, it's tough for sure anytime you lose, a guy, because, you don't got that many guys on the roster, so it's definitely tough. But, at the end of the day, we still got to try to go 1-0 that week, do everything we can, so someone's got to step up.
I think injuries happen in the NFL. You can't do anything about them. It's guys playing hard, trying to do their assignment and win the game, obviously. But, injuries happen, and I think it's kind of a big emphasis on next man up and who's ready to go and who can be trusted and who's going to go full speed.
It's always just been a next up mentality, so always have to prepare as if you're going to play every time you dress, so whenever something does happen, no one skips a beat. So
it's just next man up mentality, it all starts with practice, and just understanding the process, what we're trying to get to, and that's just getting better every day.
Obviously, injuries have played a large part in Green Bay's lack of success as of recent, but going into a game, many would say a must-win game against the Minnesota Vikings this weekend, how detrimental do you think these injuries really will be?
Thank you, Cam. Now it's time for Q&A with Green Bay. So 8 players are either limited or did not practice today, plus obviously Stokes and Savage on the injured reserve. Who are they going to miss the most? I mean, these mounting injuries are really impacting the team.
I mean, I think they'll miss Darnell Savage, which coming into the year, I think the safety position probably had the lowest expectations. I mean, Darnell Savage got benched last season and replaced by Rudy Ford. Then you lose Adrian Amos in the offseason, and Savage comes in as the quote-unquote leader there, back there at safety. But Savage has actually played decent, I think, this year. Now you take him out of the equation, you're relying on Rudy Ford and Jonathan Owens at safety. That's a big question mark. They both have starting experience. We've seen them play a lot of football in the NFL in different spots, but it's at the very least a question going against a quarterback as hot as anybody right now.
Isn't it amazing that in such a short time, Darnell Savage has almost made himself an indispensable player on the back end of this defense? I mean, he's turned it around, and they are going to miss him over this next month. Keep an eye on Aaron Jones. He didn't practice today. They don't need a halfway back Aaron Jones. They need Aaron Jones. They need full capacity star running back in that backfield. That changes the offense. There is good news. Devondre Campbell practiced today. I imagine they'll miss Luke Musgrave quite a bit. He needs those developmental snaps, and he's had some rapport with Jordan Love. But at the end of the day, I don't want to hear about injuries. The Minnesota Vikings lost Justin Jefferson. They just beat the 49ers because what happens? A start goes down. Someone steps up. TJ Hawkinson, Jordan Addison. Those guys stepped up for the Vikings. They got a big win at home. That's what the Packers need. They need to get a big win at home, have guys step up.
I'm curious to see how the tight end room will look with Musgrave out. We don't know how long, but he's been in that boot, and curious to see who steps up there. When we come back, it's time for Challenge or No Challenge. The Packers have some challenges, but we will too. Presented by the Good Guys Heating and Cooling. Going into Week 8, will the guys agree with what I have to say? Plus, we'll have some green and bold predictions. That's next on Green Bay Nation. Welcome back to Green Bay Nation. It's time now for Challenge or No Challenge, presented by the Good Guys Heating and Cooling. Same rules as always. I have something to say. If you agree, nothing happens. If you disagree, you do your best Matt LaFleur impression, all right? Tay Wicks not only caught a pass against the Broncos, but he had a nice throw, nice completion going. I think he's going to be more involved in the Packers offense going forward. Challenge or No Challenge, he has at least 3 receptions.
I'm going to challenge that, and I would like to see Dontavian Wicks more involved. He's been one of the positives, I think. They're hard to find right now at the offense. But I don't have full confidence that they'll find a way to feature who they need to feature. Romeo Doubs has 3 catches combined in the last 2 weeks. So 3 catches might not sound like much, but right now for this Packers offense, it kind of is.
Yeah, Romeo Doubs needs more catches. Matt LaFleur agrees with you. He said this Monday that they need to get Dontavian Wicks more involved. He calls plays, so he has something to do with that. And he's right. They do. I'm challenging. I'm with you, Marcus. I just don't. It's so obvious that I don't know that they're going to.
I picked 3. I thought 3 was a low number.
Yeah.
It seems like it.
All right, so let's go to the other end of the spectrum, a high number. The Vikings are averaging 370-ish yards per game. Packers are giving up 350-ish. So challenge or no challenge, the Vikings get 350-plus yards in this game.
I can't believe it. I'm going to challenge that. I feel like the Packers defense will come in with a good game plan against this Vikings offense. They just ripped apart a much better 49ers defense, but the week prior against a bad Chicago Bear defense, they only put up like 230 yards. I actually think the Packers defense will have a good day.
Yeah, I'll challenge that. No Justin Jefferson. That helps. At the end of the day, I don't want to hear about yards and points. I want to hear about the takeaways. That's what they need to do. They need to take the football away from the Vikings. But I think they'll limit the yardage.
My biggest takeaway I had was pretty controversial
Spicy.
today.
That's spicy.
All right, when we come back, it's time to wrap up the show. We're getting green and bold. It's time to wrap up the show here on Green Bay Nation. We're getting green and bold. Marcus, Ryan, who do you have winning in this game?
Unfortunately, I'm taking the Vikings. I think on paper, the Vikings should win this game. The good news from the Packers is usually when the Vikings should win, that's when they lose, but I'm taking the Vikings.
That's very optimistic. I'm even for picking the Vikings. I'm picking the Vikings because I believe in making wise life choices, and I think I'm boycotting taking the Packers for a while after that Denver issue.
A team that beats the San Francisco 49ers will probably beat a team that can't score in the first half 5 or 6 days later. So I am also taking the Minnesota Vikings. I think the Packers could surprise us. I also thought the Packers were going to beat the Broncos.
You and everyone else.
We all did. All right, that'll do it for this edition of Green Bay Nation. For Marcus Eversole, Ryan Wood, I'm Lauren Helbrecht. Thanks so much for tuning in.